Hi, I'm Savannah Jones with DMG's Bootstraps and Business. And branding your company is so important. Have you branded your company? Are you thinking about revising your brand? We'll talk with John Furgurson of BN Branding. And I love his take. It's not just design. It's all about the origins of your company, your passion. What got you interested in your business? What started your business? He circles all the way back around and has some really great advice for branding your business. Well, John, thanks for taking the time today to join me. I appreciate it. I know this is going to be a great conversation. You come with a world of knowledge and a wealth of depth in branding, but I really want to start where you started. And whenever I have a guest, I always check out LinkedIn and, kind of go online and Google, stalk a little bit and find out. And I love your homepage on your website, BN Branding, because you talk about origin stories. And it couldn't be more appropriate for us because that's what we're going to do right here. We're going to talk about your origin story.
Thanks, Savannah. It's great to be here. I appreciate your time. Yeah, the origin stories are funny because, it's really an overlooked component of our branding efforts with so many companies. They dismiss their own stories pretty quickly, right? Nobody thinks that their own story is all that interesting, right? And so, they jump into, spinning it into some sort of a corporate tale or a business story or whatever. And so a lot of what I often do from a branding standpoint is to try to get back to the roots of, okay, what's that origin story? What drove you to wherever you happen to be, right? And so for me, I'm a branding guy, you can say, been in the advertising business, but the path here was really a roundabout path. And it started, it started all the way back in high school when I was in graphic arts program in high school. And so we learned how to do silkscreen printing and ran a printing press and did photography and designed logos, even though I'm not a designer today, right? So there was some really good training at a very young age. And then I went into the printing business just because if you're in high school and you can get a printing job, that seemed way more fun to me than like pumping gas, right? So I did that, and I was a press operator. And I worked in mostly small printing companies. And so, I got to do a lot of things, wear a lot of different hats. You worked with the designers that walked in off the street half the time, right? So I did customer service and I got to see, okay, well, here I'm working on the back end of this process, right? And I got to see what the designers were doing on the front end. I thought that looked pretty cool. So one of the really fun experiences that I had was working in a super old print shop where they still had letterpress.
Oh my.
And so I literally got to put my hands on lead type and, hand set letterhead, and business cards, and literally ran the hand fed letterpress. So it was very labor intensive, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but there was a craftsmanship to that was so great. And it's like I joked today, I said, I'm a copywriter, but there aren't too many writers around who have that experience doing typography.
Right.
So I worked in printing all through college, and I went to journalism school and decided I was a better writer than I was a designer. Right. So I kind of figured that out, which is good. You always figure out your strengths and weaknesses as time goes on, right? Okay, you gravitate toward what you're good at. It's just human nature. So I figured out that I was a better writer than designer, and I went that route and got a journalism degree. And then I got out of college at U of O and went to work in the advertising business because that was the coolest thing that there was in the journalism school, I thought. Right? You were going to be a journalist such as yourself, go on TV, and I didn't have any aspirations to do that. And so I thought, well, the next coolest thing is got to be advertising. So that's what I did. And I became a copywriter. And my first job out of school was doing direct response copywriting for Norm Thompson, which at the time was a great training ground for any copywriter because it was all very well-defined direct response. And we knew exactly what headlines pulled well and which ones didn't. And we knew which photos worked better than that photo. And we, we really had it down to a science way before the days of A/B testing was even invented. Right. So that was great. And then worked in some ad agencies after that. As young creative people do tend to get a little flighty, and they always think that the grass is always greener at the next job, right? So, I was certainly guilty of that, and I wanted to work in an ad agency. And so that's what I did, and worked in some ad agencies, and, that was great experience. Although I will say good bosses are a little hard to come by in the advertising world, I would say. If I look back on it, I say, I never really got to work for a really great boss, which was too bad. So anyway, and the other drawback to that in Portland at the time was there wasn't a whole lot of work for the creative side in TV. And so I was doing a lot of radio, I was doing a lot of print, I was doing a lot of, collateral and writing of various types. But, the opportunities to do TV campaigns were few and far between. And so I decided, all right, well, I really need some experience in doing video, right? So I left and I took a job at a production company, and they did a lot of direct response TV and also a lot of corporate, long format corporate video production, big budget stuff for big companies like HP and things like that. So that was really great experience for me because I really got to learn the ins and outs of video production, television production, directing, and all the ins and outs of that. So that was really good. And then after that, I moved to Bend, Oregon, and decided that I took an agency job in Bend because I wanted to raise a family. That was a priority at the time. And I thought it was a great place to raise a family. And of course, the way agency jobs go, I was here in Bend for, less than 2 years, and all of a sudden I'm out of my agency job because things happen in that world. And so I'm sitting there going, wow, okay, I'm in this tiny little town in Central Oregon, now what do I do? Didn't want to up and move, and so I hung up a shingle. And I had 2 accounts. I was doing work for Sun River Resort at the time and the local cable company, and that's what I did. I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. And I probably had no business doing it. I always joke about that too, because in the advertising world, creative teams always leave and start something new because they think they can do it better, right? It's, we could totally run that better. But then we do things exactly the same way that we did at the previous agency, right? So we're like, well, let's take their business model and start something new, and somehow it's just going to magically be better, right? And so I kind of laugh about that. It's the same, but it's your own, right? So it's better, right? So yeah, so it's better in that respect. But there are all the same challenges apply, right? So, and of course, the first challenge was, all right, I need to come up with a brand for my own firm. So being a copywriter and working on the creative side, and this was a long time ago, and I saw, some developments on the web front and the URL world and all that was happening at the time, in Amazon rising and everything. And so I decided to call my company AdWords. Short and sweet, AdWords. It's what I do. I write ads. Perfect. And so I bought adwordscom and did a wonderful job with a creative partner of mine developing our brand identity around AdWords, and it was wonderful. And I fell in love with my own brand identity for sure. And so and that worked great, and it worked really well for 5 or 6 years. And then I started getting offers for the adwords.com URL. And I initially thought it was actually a joke. It was pretty funny. I thought some friend of mine was playing a joke on me, but it did turn out to be a legitimate offer. And then they kept coming back, and I held out for a while. So I ended up selling the adwordscom URL to Google.
Right.
So, not exactly my claim to fame, but it was a nice bonus. And you mentioned that you've had some guests on, Savannah, that talk a lot about reinvention, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, well, this is a pretty darn good time to reinvent myself. Reinvent the company, rename it, rebrand it, and, start fresh. And I actually also took a little bit of time off, and I wrote a golf book and helped start a nonprofit organization, a children's museum in Bend, Oregon also. And so that was good. The timing was right. And anyway, changed the name and ended up with the name BN Branding, which is where we are today. So that was 2005.
So you've got some years under your belt now with BN Branding.
Yeah. So it's been, it's been a wild ride since then, of course, because 2009 rolled around and Bend, Oregon was not looking very prosperous, shall we say. So one of the great lessons that I learned from that experience was, diversity is your friend when it comes to client portfolios. We had a lot of our business coming from the real estate development world at that time. There was a lot of money in real estate development in Central Oregon and all around, right? In 2008, 2007, things were going really well. And then, they just pulled the rug out from everybody. So that was one thing that I really learned. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, get your client base diversified across as many different verticals as you can. And so these companies that get really niched and just really narrow in their specialties, for me, that doesn't work for a couple of reasons. Number one, like I said, if that particular industry goes south, then you're in trouble. But the other thing for me is it's just a boredom factor, right?
Right.
We've done a lot of work in tourism. I wouldn't want to do work in tourism all the time. And I wouldn't want to do work in real estate development all the time. And, it's that variety that makes things interesting for me.
And gives you longevity. I mean, you if you're looking at something that's different over time, you continue to go down that path. It's like, oh, this is different. That's interesting. Oh, this is different, along the same path, along the same line, but just different industries.
Right. Yeah. That's what keeps it interesting, keeps it from getting burned out, because there's always something new. There's always a new business to learn, and every new client is a great adventure in learning. That's what makes this business so interesting. So we've been doing a lot of work in natural foods in the last 10 years. Some vitamins and minerals and supplements. We're now launching a new frozen food brand, which is really exciting. So it's fun to be in from the very ground floor on something new and big, because it's got that potential to be the next great food brand. So, right. and coming up with a name is particularly rewarding. And so we did the naming, the brand, the packaging, the whole brand Bible for that. And it's very rewarding when people I'll be in a Zoom meeting these days, and we'll be talking about, we're working on the Expo West virtual trade show booth and blah, blah, blah. And somebody will pipe up and go, well, on page, 15 of the brand book, it says this and that. Can we just use that? Right. So I love it when clients actually refer to the brand book that we did, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. Right. So that kind of thing is great. So we're doing that. We're doing golf. Golf is a passion of mine. I do believe that anytime you can incorporate your passions into your work world, that's always better. There are a lot of companies in Bend, Oregon that are outdoor related, right? So a lot of people move here and they create their own jobs, and they happen to be directly related to what they're doing on the weekends, right? Climbing or biking or whatever.
Good job if you can get it, right?
Absolutely, it is. It's great work. It's great work if you can find it. That's what they say. So, yeah, this is really an entrepreneurial place these days. It's changed so much. I mean, when I first moved here, the economy was not diversified at all like it is today. We have pretty nice high tech sector here now, and it's just everybody's bringing their own jobs and their own gigs and their own ideas, and that entrepreneurial spirit's running really deep here, which is fun.
Which gives you plenty of opportunity for new clients and to meet.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have one really good local client, and that's it. Everything else is, elsewhere in the country, which is fine.
Yeah, well, the way things are now, I mean, everything is, countrywide, nationwide, across the U.S. I mean, you can have a client anywhere now. Right. It's not just local. You're not dependent on local dollars anymore. It's really nationwide.
When I started out, I spent a lot of time driving over visiting clients over in Portland, and don't have to do that anymore. So, things are great. I was doing quite a bit of remote work before COVID, and now, of course, it's everybody. We're all on the same playing field on that front now. So that's good. So what else would you like to know, Savannah? Do you want to talk more about specific branding questions?
Let's talk about your branding Bible. Let's just kind of talk about somebody who's watching right now. They have been considering branding their business, or they've attempted it and really hasn't taken off. So what is the first step? Like, what's the first step and the hardest step, or maybe even the biggest question you get all the time? Like, where do they get started?
Well, a lot of potential clients, of course, have a misconception that branding is merely a design exercise, right? So they'll call and they'll talk and say, well, we need a new logo, and which is great. We're happy to do that. But that's the tiniest little piece of the puzzle. And so what I almost always inevitably do is turn it back around and work back upstream and really work hard to delve into what is at the heart of this business owner that is making him enthusiastic about this business. So I can give you an example in that in the golf world, we have a new client, and it's actually a business that revolves around the inventor of a golf product, and it's just funny because he's got a good product and it's out there, and it's just not getting traction, right? And so that's why he called. Nobody calls when things are going really well, right? So he calls, and so so we've been working with him for a few months now, and it's just interesting because as I delve into the roots of his brand, things come to the surface, and the more I get to know him and what makes him tick, the more I see how far off his whole website is, and right. And so, for instance, one of the things that really came through loud and clear in my discussions with him was this idea of simplicity, because we were laughing about golf and how everybody tends to make it way more complicated than it needs to be, right? And paralysis by analysis and all these things. And I said to him, so what I'm hearing is that you really want your brand to be about simplicity. He's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And so then of course I say, well, then why on earth are you packaging your product like you are? Because the package was ridiculously complex, and why, and it's just like, it's so funny. So that's the crux of the beginning of a branding effort right there, I guess, is a good example, right? So, this business owner was so passionate about keeping things simple and really helping people, and yet his business had taken a form that was working completely contradictory to that, right? I laughed. I told him, and I was brutally honest with him, actually. It was pretty fun because he took it very well. And I said, I had a complete IKEA moment when I opened your product. The box came, and I open it all up, and there's just like all these pieces spread out all over the place. I don't know if you've ever put anything together from IKEA, Savannah, but it can be a nightmare.
Right.
And you're just sitting there, and you've got, Swedish instructions, and you're just going, I can't possibly get my head around this. I mean, I literally did that. I was just like, oh my God, what on earth am I going to do with this? And so that really, I think, summarizes branding in a way, because it's not about the design of his logo. It's like, okay, what are you passionate about? What do you want this brand to stand for? And how do we make that come to life in every facet of your business, right? So his packaging didn't match his brand. So we did a brand book for him. We're working on that actually as we speak. And it's like, okay, we're going to put this down on paper. We're going to get your story straight, and we're going to stick with it. And so then if he comes out with some, harebrained idea for some new product, we can take that brand Bible and say, okay, look, does that new product initiative match the core of your brand? Right. And we did work for Black Butte Ranch, actually, one of the most iconic resorts in Oregon. And I happened to run into the general manager. It was like 10 years after we'd been doing work for him. And she's like, oh, I introduced myself because she was new. And I said, oh, you're the new GM at Black Butte. And she's like, yeah. And we're chatting. And she goes, oh, you wrote that? I have that sitting on my desk. And so it becomes a guidebook for your own business. And people may think that's silly, but I got to tell you, 9 out of 10 companies that I ever encounter have never stopped to do that key strategic thinking that they really need to do up front. Right. They just dive in and they make a business go regardless. But then at some point in time, they have to stop and start thinking about, well, what is this really all about, and how can we articulate what we're all about in a more effective way? So
branding and marketing are always part of a business plan, but they seem to get skipped over because they're so focused on the bottom line and the revenue and the staff. And so that step often doesn't get the attention that it needs in regards to building your company.
Right. Right. And there is a lot of talk, and, marketing's terrible in terms of our acronyms and our BS, this and that and the other thing. But it's what's in your heart and what's, we only work with CEOs and business owners. That's one of our things, so we work directly with the person who started the company. Right. And a lot of times they're so lost in the day-to-day operations, they forgot why on earth they even did it to begin with, and so we spend some time digging and bringing things up. And sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, because it's like, well, okay, we started over here, and then they'll say, well, that was a little bit of a pivot. Right. Which is fine. And it's great to pivot and reinvent yourself. But there's got to be something at your core that's driving. It's like they say your North Star or whatever you want to call it. So that's really where our work revolves around that. And then, it's a creative exercise because, at heart, I'm still a writer, a copywriter. I still work on the creative side of the business. And so we help people nail down that brand strategy, and then we help them execute on that in creative new ways. So it's a 1-2 punch.
Well, for somebody who is a business owner or a CEO or that decision maker that's deep into it, and they're coming back around to, oh, well, now we're coming out of the pandemic and we made some shifts and pivots over the pandemic, and now we have to kind of get our train back on the tracks. How do they get started with that? Like, what would be your suggestion, your tips and advice for somebody right now who may have lost some momentum, or they realize now we went through some changes, things are a little bit different, or we took our eye off the ball? What's that step? What tips and advice could you give somebody right now to take some action that would get that ball rolling?
That's a good point when you said take your eye off the ball. I think just accepting the fact that, maybe I took my eye off the ball for a while. So it's that self-awareness and that, and just admitting like, probably didn't do that as well as I could have for the last few years. And I know we need to make a change. And it's hard, because everybody has that fear and uncertainty and doubt, right, about changing things up, but there comes a point where if you're really stuck, there's you can't just stay stuck, right? So you got to push forward, and sometimes it's scary and it's uncomfortable. But finding somebody who has broad, far-reaching marketing experience who will really listen to you is pretty key to this whole thing, right? Because it's not about me. It's about you and your challenges and the hurdles that you can foresee and the uncertainty, and just finding somebody who will really listen, and a team of people who are going to devote themselves to helping you succeed. I mean, some people, they can't get out of their own way, and they may hire a good team of people, but they're not allowing them to help. It's the old, let me help you, help me, or however that goes.
Let me help
right?
you help yourself.
Right, exactly. So anyway, so it's finding somebody who will really listen and being willing to just say, you know what, everything's on the table here. I understand that I'm stuck, and we've been successful to this point, and you can own those successes and celebrate those, but then also accept the fact that, hey, I got to do something different. I have to delegate something else. I was just talking about that today with someone who's like, you need a little more strategic delegation, So, there's a big part of it really is, since we work with mostly smaller and medium-sized companies, there's a lot of business consulting built into this, I'm talking to people about, well, what's the pricing structure on your product, and does it even make sense to make that product if that's not really on brand for you, so the branding umbrella is really broad, and all sorts of things fall under the branding umbrella that people wouldn't think of, like customer service and every touch point. It's not just the design. I say that a million times. Everybody thinks branding is just a design exercise, and that's part of it. We want to make you look good, and we want to portray the best image that we possibly can for your company, but that's as much about getting your story straight as it is design.
Right. And there's a lot of back to the Bible, the branding Bible, the branding book. When you're looking at a logo or a website, it's so much deeper than that. And the CEO and the business owner, it's their baby, it's their product, and it's difficult to say, oh, we need to switch gears or we need to make changes, because they're so focused on the day-to-day and the overall picture. Their scope and their vision is focused in another direction. And so the branding and the customer service, just all of that, without the guidance and the direction, their eyes are focused on bottom lines and overall pictures. So it's nice to have somebody come in who is an expert in the field of branding and marketing and can really kind of hone in on that other side of the business.
Yeah, I think that the perspective that business owners can get from a real marketing expert, an outside expert, is invaluable. Because you get so close to it, and you're just inside your own bottle, and and that's just the nature of business. You got stuff to do, you got your things done, and you've got people to manage and numbers to make and all those kinds of pressures, and you can't expect to be able to do it all. There's just no way. And one of the challenges, of course, and you, as you well know, it's, the marketing world has gotten ridiculously complex. It's really hard to keep up with it, to sort out, and people just come and they're just like, I have no idea what to do. That's probably the single most common refrain that I hear. Like, I know I got to do something different. I just have no idea where to even start. So that's what we do. And we say, okay, well, and then it's a little, it's a little bit easier exercise when you're looking at tactics, right? Because then you can say, okay, here are the tactics that you're currently doing. And we can start with that and assess those. And then usually we find that the tactics are kind of all over the place, right? So then we got to circle back around to that brand again. Well, do you have any kind of a brand book or anything that says, what this is all about? And I'm like, no. So again, back around to the brand Bible.
Right.
So yeah, it's a tremendously helpful tool. It really is. And it's not rocket science to come up with those. I mean, it involves, market research and some psychology, some counseling perhaps at times, and a good deep reflection on the operation also. So, you got to look at all the pieces.
That's good to have the reference, like you said, the GM of Black Butte, a new GM. So now she can go back to that book that's been there for a while and kind of see where they've been, where they may be heading, or where there may need to be some changes, but a good reference if you start to get off track again.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I say. It's like, okay, here's our story and we're sticking with it. We're holding up this brand book. Come hell or high water, this is it, right? So that's not to say that it's set in stone, and they can evolve, and they do evolve over time, but still there's some roots there that are important, I think. So,
well, is there anything else that you want to add before we call it a day? I think mostly people, like I said before, people discount their own stories, right? Back to the origin story. And I would advise people to, embrace what got you started and be willing to be open to new approaches to that. You got to love to learn. If you don't love to learn, business is going to be hard grind. Right.
Right. It's going to be hard enough as it is. But if you don't love to learn, and if you're not open-minded, it's going to be really, really hard, because then you can't even get help from somebody who wants to help you.
Right.
So that would be a really fundamental aspect of what I would preach, if you would say that. So, yeah.
Well, I love it. And I love the fact that you dial everything back to the origin story, because if it felt good and you followed your gut in the beginning, why wouldn't that work for you middle, beginning, end? I mean, feeling your way to what works for you with help.
Yeah. I mean, chances are, you need to circle back around to that core piece, and maybe you never really spent time thinking about that. Most companies never do, and that's okay. It's okay that you maybe are now stuck, and it's okay to work backwards and figure it out after the fact, because 9 out of 10 companies are doing that anyway.
Right.
So, it's really, I don't look at that as a problem. A lot of business owners, I got this big branding problem. I'm like, well, it's not really a problem. It's just an exercise that we're going to go through, and we'll work it out, and we'll figure it out, and you'll be a lot better off for it, and you'll be moving forward.
Right.
So which is way better than not moving forward. Right.
Right.
So, somebody once said, if you're not growing, you're dying as a business. Right.
Right.
So you got to keep growing in some form or another. And I think you should keep growing, personally as well. So if you don't do that, it's going to be hard also.
Well, John, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and I'll add BN branding links and your links and all the information at the end of this. It'll be available for all the viewers and the listeners in the show notes. And I just love your story, and I love the fact that you relate back to the lead type and printing, and kind of how your whole story evolved to where you are, but you still stayed your course.
Good. Thanks. So yeah, I think it was good. It is kind of funny, because my conversations with the designers that I work with, they always, I'm like, I'm not sure about the leading you got going on. And they're like, what? So yeah, so I do have more credibility than most copywriters when it comes to talking to the designers about the ins and outs of their typography. So that'll always serve me well. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
appreciate
Anna.
it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, John, for that solid advice on branding businesses. If you'd like more information about BN Branding and John Furgurson, just check out our show notes. Also, you'll find more information about DMG in these podcasts. Thank you, as always, for checking us out. I appreciate it. Tell your pals, and if you get a chance, subscribe. Thanks.